Are live. Okay. I'm going over to check my Facebook page and now I can't find my Facebook page. Let's see if I can find it now. I haven't been on for a while, but people have probably missed me saying, oh, are we on? And are we not on and whatnot? But okay, we are on.
Okay.
Well, welcome everybody to Facebook Live. I'm Mitzi Szereto, and I know I've been missing in action for a while, but I'm back, and I'm here to talk about my current book release, The Best New True Crime Stories, Unsolved Crimes and Mysteries, which it is exactly what it says on the tin. And I'm joined today by one of my wonderful contributors, Pamela Costello, who's in the US. Hi, Pamela.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you too. I saw you when I was doing the event for Joseph Beth. I think you were in there somewhere, right?
I was in the audience watching, and it was great with two other
virtual audience. Don't you love virtual events?
Yes, they're, well, now they're so common, so it's just
Yeah. I don't think we can ever go back again. And I know everyone's always saying, oh, the in-person bookstore events, and I suppose that's nice for the personal touch, but you really can reach out to a much bigger audience when you're online. I mean, people from all over the world can tune in, and it's not like they can, drive to the, bookstore in Seattle or New York or London if they're living, in say Sydney or wherever.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's wonderful.
Yeah, let's keep it going. We need virtual events forever. Anyways, I'm going to be talking with Pamela. She wrote a story called When Boston Turns Its Back. And it's a cold case. The book is pretty much cold cases, unsolved crimes. And I don't think anything's been solved since it's been published, knock wood, which was my biggest fear, that the book would come out and then things would be solved. Give us an idea of your story. When does your case take place?
In the late 90s in Boston, and about, I want to say 1996.
Okay. And one of the most striking things in the story is how you talk about the culture of the time, young people, university students, that sort of thing. Set things up. You were also a young woman in Boston at this time, and you were living the same type of lifestyle. Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So I was a few years younger than the victim, and it was a very gruesome crime. And I think that's sort of what always kind of stuck with me over the years, was just this thing that how could no one know anything? And she went to a lot of the same clubs and bars that I went to, and a lot of it was in things I was reading through my research. It was kind of victim shaming, which to me was a little off, because me, my friends, everyone I knew were doing the same things, probably taking the same risks, and we didn't think there were risks at the time. Everyone didn't have a cell phone at the time. It was a very different culture. But I grew up north of Boston, and going in with my friends, basically every weekend, sometimes during the week. It was just a normal culture to be out, especially, right from the age of, about 18 on, to be in these places and to be in these situations.
Yeah, I can identify that with that as well. I mean, when I was living in LA too, I was, pretty much every Saturday night out clubbing. Sometimes you'd go have breakfast at 4 a.m.
Oh yeah.
And, you didn't really, worry about it. I mean, because that's just what part of the culture, that's what everybody did.
Exactly. But, I mean, I said in the book, like, that we kept the IHOPs in the area open, because we would go out to the clubs, and we would, the bars, and in the story, she goes to a particular club, and a couple of years later, I was there. It went on for years. The place, it changed, owners and whatnot, but it was still the same place, and they changed the name, trying to get maybe maybe some distance from the crime. But honestly, I don't even know if it would have changed if they hadn't changed the name, if it was just the same.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you made an interesting point about the victim shaming. We'll get back to that in a bit, but that does seem to be I've mentioned before that I've noticed, and I didn't intentionally do this, but there is a pattern in the book, especially when the women are victims of this sort of victim shaming or victim blame, and this, you brought it on yourself, and you should have been out, or you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that, and that just seems to be such a prevalent thing. And unfortunately, it's not changing. But
absolutely.
Now, our unfortunate victim, murder victim in your story, Karina. Tell us about Karina. Who is Karina?
Well, she was a Swedish au pair, and she was, she was from this very small village, about 300 people. Everybody knew her, back home, and she had 3 older sisters. Some of them had also gone to be au pairs. Her father, in various interviews, said she was trying to go out and show us she could be on her own, but she seemed to also be a little hesitant about leaving. He said the last thing she said to him was, I hope I'm making the right decision. And she went, to America to have some experiences, and by all indications was just a very sweet, smart, caring girl, and kind of got herself caught up in certain things. And there's a lot of gaps of information, who she was dating, and why. And she had written back to a friend that something had happened, and she was coming home, and she did want to come home early. It's unclear whether the family she was staying with knew that. So there's a lot of questions to it, but there's also kind of a wealth of information that seems, I don't want to say overlooked, because I'm sure the police did their due diligence in the crime. And I know I've been through many interviews with certain police officers and certain assistant district attorneys, and they're still very much torn up about the crime because they have no answers. But it was a very shocking crime as well, very gruesome.
Just for our American viewers, because they're not really that familiar with what an au pair is, and having lived in England, that's a common thing. It's usually usually a young woman who travels to a foreign country to look after someone's children, and they are live-in. So they
absolutely
part of the family. And it's a common thing for a lot of young women from different countries to go and do.
Right. So it was, so I looked up, and one of the things it was advertised as daycare with cultural flair. So, and this particular family that she had been with had a few au pairs before her, and it was not clear why they had left. They actually had a room in their house specifically built for an au pair. To be honest with you, before I had heard about the case, and I mean, I was a kid, 16, 17 years old. I had no idea what an au pair was. I'd never heard of anyone that had one. They lived in a very affluent community south of Boston. So.
Yeah, it's usually families that are a little bit more well-to-do to be able to do that, and have maybe both parents work outside the house, or sometimes not even. They just want someone else to help out with the kids. In Karina's case, so she was looking after 2 children, right?
Yes, one a school-age boy, I believe, first grade, and then a younger sibling.
Okay, and then the father was a respected photographer, if I'm correct.
A commercial photographer, and the wife was an artist, and still is. Actually, some of her paintings that I've seen online they're up for interpretation, but it's almost as if you can see Karina in some of the images. To me, it was Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
So.
So what happened with Karina? She was just going about her life and enjoying her weekends, her time off, and hanging out with her other friends. She pretty much hung out with other Swedish community members, like au pairs as well, right?
Absolutely. So, what a lot of people don't realize is like an au pair, like that's pretty much a 24/7 job during the week. And because they can be there no matter what, the kids are sick, the hours are, it's not like a traditional daycare or even maybe a traditional nanny that lives outside of the house. She was not only responsible for the children, she was responsible for housework. And she had written back home that it was just a lot, just the house. She enjoyed the kids, but the housework was really stressful. And on the weekends, she did want to explore the city. So where her employer, the father, he had a studio in South Boston where he was a commercial photographer. So he would let her stay there on the weekends. And so she could go out with her friends. And it was predominantly all au pairs that she met and would go out with, and go to clubs and, pretty much do what every young person in Boston does.
And but one evening, it put paid to it. Yeah. So you mentioned earlier this being a gruesome crime, but so basically, what happened to Karina?
So she went out with friends. It was actually a night she wanted to celebrate because it was the summer solstice. That's a very big holiday in Sweden. And it's actually a holiday in which relationships, whether romantic or other, are celebrated or, considered omens are good things. And she went out for the night, and less than, I think it's about 33 hours later, her body was found cut in half. And the lower half of her body has never been found. So.
That's just sort of the kind of thing you think of as a serial killer kind of modus operandi or whatever. But actually, there really wasn't. They could not actually trace this to any type of serial situation.
No, and it was not to get too much into the story, but it was a very precision cut, is what the police. So they think it was possibly someone with some kind of medical knowledge. It brought the police to tons of different cases over the years, but nothing that, could really match what had happened to her. And I mean, something so gruesome. And, you think of a serial killer and you think, we say he, we assume it was a man, most
Usually,
likely.
yeah.
But I think that there was some other case somewhere. And I mean, you scour it and, because you can't think someone did this once. And
yeah, exactly. It makes you think either something got missed, or maybe, I mean, we're all speculating here, but maybe the killer, this was the first one he did, and maybe something happened that he couldn't continue in his career as a serial murderer, because it just doesn't sound like a one-off type of a thing you would do. It just smacks of too much of it.
And I mean, a lot of like what the police said was like, it was kind of just a coincidence that she was found. A man was just rummaging for, bottles to turn in, and happened upon her in this dumpster. And so the police said we could have been looking at just a missing persons case for these years if that didn't happen. Because like I said, it was a short window of time, and to commit such a heinous crime. They've never found the crime scene, which is something else that's pretty shocking. So yeah, it was just a gruesome crime.
There's so many elements to this that are strange. I mean, like I said, the killing, they can't find any previous ones that are like that, and then it just seems to end. Because I mean, I'm assuming we've not had anything since then, or
No.
perhaps, you know, if I'm correct, the officers involved, they haven't forgotten the case. They're still kind of back burner a bit.
Absolutely. There was, you know, one officer in particular, he says he thinks of her every day because he goes by, you know, where the body was dumped every day. And he's just like, it's always in my mind. There's a church right across the street. He's like, I go into the church. But they basically said at this point, like, they say they don't want to say it would take a miracle to solve it, but they say, you know, somebody has to come forward. We need more information. So
it's just weird. I mean, how no one knows anything unless somebody who the killer maybe is dead or imprisoned. But you know, even if the killer's in prison, they do tend to talk.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's something you brag about, this type of a killing. They usually do it because they, you know, want to, you know, it's they get off on it, obviously. I mean,
exactly.
Then again, you know, could it have been somebody she knew, or because was she targeted specifically, or was she just unlucky?
And that's a lot of things, you know. She didn't realize she went through an agency. She thought it was everything was legitimate coming over here. However, she did not have the proper visa. She was actually an illegal.
Oh.
And you know, she didn't realize that. She thought she was going through the proper channels, but you're supposed to have a 13-month visa, and she did not have that. So it's like, did somebody know that? Did somebody know, you know, perhaps, you know, someone wouldn't be looking for her? Was she targeted? She did tell a friend, you know, something happened really bad. Did it have something to do with that? The idea of like sex crimes was floated around, but you know.
Well, I mean, it is a sex crime of a sort. I mean,
Yeah.
even if there was no tampering with the body, but I mean, there usually is some sort of sexual motivation for doing anything like this. But you know, that's a bit dodgy about the agency, though, that they didn't properly, you know, I mean, that's not usually common. Most au pairs are going to have a proper visa and whatnot. And apparently this was a chronic thing that there were several au pairs that were pretty much illegal.
Several, and they don't go through the traditional training that an au pair goes. So she maybe didn't know, you know, what she was getting into. And I mean, that's like a really sad thing. This was just a young girl looking for experience, looking to, you know, like her parents said, you know, grow up a little bit and prove something to herself or to her family. And yeah, it didn't seem like, his agency was closed, but I looked into the man who ran the agency she went through. But yeah, he had set up a bunch of au pairs, and you know, also they didn't have contracts, so she didn't know what was expected of her prior to going. So
and then there was nobody for support as well. It doesn't sound like they were very supportive if she was having difficulties or uncertainties about the job responsibilities, or even problems with her employers or whatever.
I mean, I don't think there was anyone she really could have gone to if that was the case, if she was having problems with her employers or, you know, even someone else. But yeah, it was as you like peel back the story, it's like you find so many other things, not just like the complete shock of it, which initially drew me to the story. But, you know, as you kind of peel back the layers of it, you're just like, how could all of these things, you know, led to this event? You know, how did someone not see it beforehand?
Yeah, it seems that she was pretty much on her own, really literally out there on the high seas with no life raft. And this kind of continues after her death as well, because I think one of the most poignant things in this story, and it is sort of why you named it When Boston Turns Its Back, is this whole thing about the concept of the outsider, the foreigner. It seems that as you go on and so eloquently discuss in the story, people just weren't that bothered. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of it as well. She's pretty much known, if people know it, and some of my friends and family that read the story back home were like, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember that." She's known as the Swedish Nanny that was cut in half, and I mean, hello. And a lot of it has to do with there was another case with an au pair, probably within 6 months of this happening to her. And this au pair was tried and convicted of manslaughter of a little boy in her care. So the city really had like a bad taste in its mouth for like au pairs. It was something like, oh, they're these hard partying girls that go out on the weekends. And I'm just like, every person I know was, a person that went out on the weekends. It was like, oh, well, she had a fake ID. I had a fake ID. It wasn't a big deal. And I think, I almost say, if it was me, I can imagine like the major outrage and the like, oh my God, she was one of us, and how could we allow this to happen? And my family would have been there all the time. It just wouldn't, to me, it would just have such a profound impact. There was other girls that, went missing and in Boston, and it was like every night on the news, like the news cycle never changed. Where with Karina, it was just like, it was kind of like a flash. It was like it happened, and then, they discussed it. I actually, I have a pretty good memory, and I remember the newscast, and I remember it was, maybe a week or so, and then it was just kind of brushed aside. And even going back through newspaper clippings in my research, it's a lot of the same thing.
That's really sad, because I mean, the fact that the crime was so shocking, and this young woman, just going about her life and ends up with half of her body found in a dumpster, you would think this thing would be, not to make light of it, but milked to death by the media, because it was such
Absolutely.
and calls out there, for witnesses, anybody that knows anything. But it's as if she just, okay, she's, and again, you say so much in the story that she wasn't one of us. She wasn't from Boston.
No, she wasn't. And that's, I'm, proud Bostonian. I haven't lived there in almost 20 years, and I still say back home. She wasn't. And I don't think, the sense of outrage, when I think about Boston and, the marathon bombings, about 10 years ago, just how the city comes together. And it really is a city that comes together. The city was at a standstill when they were looking for the suspects for the bombers. I mean, now we see cities that are, after COVID's completely shut down, but I mean, they shut down the city in 2013. I mean, they shut down airspace. People were confined to their homes to find these suspects. And, the whole city came together, and, everyone was at, Fenway Park, people wearing Boston Strong t-shirts and stuff. And I think people from Boston just had a real sense of pride of where they're from. And I mean, I definitely feel that. It was a great place to grow up. It was amazing. And, we always feel a part of something. You're a part of something bigger. Is what
Karina
I always
wasn't
say.
a part of it.
No, she was not. And
No.
It's just very sad. So.
And it sounds like as well, she really pretty much was confined to her, as we said earlier, her circle of friends, which were other Swedish au pairs. She didn't have like American friends. She didn't really associate that much.
There was conflicting reports that she may have been involved or had a boyfriend that was a police officer, but it was nothing I could verify. It was just kind of conjecture, like maybe. And like I said before, like the victim, she had boyfriends. She was a young, beautiful girl, and I mean, and what strikes me too is like, when you think about, just last year, the Gabby Petito case, she was this young, Karina was this young, beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed girl, and you think about all the cases over the years that the national media has like really clung to, like, you know, Natalie Holloway, or, you know, whereas, you know, sometimes victims of color and indigenous victims are overlooked, but, you know, a lot of times these, you know, blonde, you know, blue-eyed girls are really made into a story, and she kind of wasn't.
Yeah, in this case, this was somebody who, you know, you can't say that it was, what's the expression? It's slipping mind, but you were saying about how like victim,
Missing white woman
yeah,
syndrome or
missing white woman syndrome. In this case, it was like, we don't even, she didn't even qualify for that.
No, it was just, you know, it was just, it happened, and then, you know, it was over.
Yeah,
And the really heartbreaking part was, you know, reading, and there wasn't a whole lot of information. I had to search pretty deep about, you know, her family, you know, receiving half of their sister back, and just, you know,
yeah, that's just
how,
horrible, horrible, horrible. And then you
yeah.
wonder, you know, I mean, it's one of those things you imagine they must have nightmares about this, thinking about where is the rest of her and what has been done to it. I mean, it's just, it's just the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, and her father, I don't believe I think he declines to be interviewed now, just because, you know, they contact him on the anniversary of her death, and, you know, he said something, you know, very poignant, like, he's like, an anniversary, I think of a celebration, you know, this is my nightmare.
Yeah, this is not an
So,
anniversary. Yeah, exactly, exactly. You mentioned too, as well, as far as there was really nobody to be constantly pushing the story either, because with her family living in this, what is it, a village in Sweden? I mean, they weren't
yes.
there. I mean, they, you know, I mean, I'm assuming, did they come to the States at all?
No, not in any indication. She was sent back, and it was heartbreaking. They had this. They wouldn't wear black to her funeral because they didn't want to have any memory of she was killed. And you know, there was a few programs that were on the Swedish news, but again, this wasn't a girl from like a big city or a big. She was just, and you know, everybody knew her. She was just this nice girl from this, you know, tiny village. And, you know, I think also what probably hurt was maybe the language barrier of talking to her family. And this is an age before, you know, the internet was just coming of age. But I mean, this was before, you know, there was any way for them to, you know, have contact probably with
Yeah.
the local police.
Yeah. That would, we think about that because we take these things for granted: mobile phones, internet, you know, instant
Mm-hmm.
communication. It doesn't matter where in the world you are. You know, not some little Swedish village. Imagine having to make a call to the United States. So it'd be a much bigger deal, I imagine, than it would be now. But someone has asked a question in our question thread is about DNA.
So there were fingerprints found, but they didn't have enough markers to make any kind of definitive answers. So another gruesome detail, her body was washed clean. Her makeup was off. So a circular saw was found also in the dumpster where she was found, but no traces of DNA.
You know, this is just so serial killer-ish. I mean, I just can't imagine that this was not either the first victim of a serial killer or a victim that for some reason somehow never got tied to any other case. I mean, perhaps it was maybe the cases were out, not even in the same country. They may have been in another country if they hadn't, if law enforcement didn't liaise perhaps with Interpol or, you know, Scotland Yard or whatever. But it just has to be, and maybe this guy's career got cut short for some either imprisonment or death or
It's
whatever.
just too good of a crime, like
Yeah, it's
to
too
have that.
textbook.
Exactly. So that's another thing that really struck me. It's like there has to be another case somewhere, or was he that good that he didn't get caught and it was just this random thing that she wasn't found very far from the club she was at. So
but it sounds like she had to have been taken somewhere, because I mean, you don't go, it's unlikely that you have the saw and all the things to clean everything with you, and you can do it in the van or something. I just don't see that. So, but I mean, that's just so bizarre to go and take somebody, kill them somewhere, and then bring them back pretty much where you took them from and dump them. That just, I mean, that just is odd.
And it's almost like it does sound like a serial killer, like having that bravado, like, oh, the police can't catch me, type of thing, having some kind of, weird confidence about, like, I'm not going to get caught. And, and
dumping her right where you took her from, as well as sort of thumbing your nose at law enforcement as well, like you that cocky.
Exactly. Because it really wasn't that far. My friends actually,
whoever this was makes Ted Bundy sort of pale in comparison.
No, I know, right? My friends and I actually, over the summer, we walked exactly, where the club was, to where the loft she was staying at, and to where to where she was found. Not the crime scene, because they don't have the crime scene, and it was so eerie. And it's just so sad, like, right, the dumpster where she was found, like, it says, there's a sign up there that says, like, no dumping per police, and it's just like, there was a girl found here,
But probably no one thinks about that. You're probably the only one who's aware of it. People probably.
Well, hopefully people read the book and it brings more awareness, I hope.
Yeah, hopefully. Someone's asked if the case is still being investigated. We did mention earlier that it's still considered an open case, right?
Mm-hmm. It is still considered an open case. And like I said, that police detective, I believe he's now like a sergeant. He may have retired. It stayed with him, and, other law enforcement in the area. But it seems like it stayed with them, but it didn't stay with the city. And again, that outsider kind of mentality comes into play.
Do you think that's a Boston thing, or do you think that would be, I mean, because I mean, the way you talk about Boston, it does have this sort of sense of closeness, and whereas other cities, like, say, I lived in LA, I don't think LA had that feel at all. It's just like fragmented all over the place.
I do think Boston has that. It's almost, to me, it's almost like it almost has a small town feel, and the way people are and the way people know each other. And my whole family was from there, and still a lot of them are there, and it's a lot of people live and die in the same places they were, and it does always feel like a tight-knit community, and that's one of the reasons I miss it, and one of the reasons why I loved being there. And it's still hard. I mean, I still consider myself a Bostonian, even though I've been gone so long. So I definitely think it does have that type of feel to it.
Yeah. So again, that's that whole sense that, she wasn't one of us. So they pretty much forgot about her. If it would have been a Boston girl who this would have happened to, I would think that there would be huge outrage and people really doing everything they can to find the perpetrator.
And who knows if that would have, if they would have found somebody had it been a Boston girl, because it sounds like this criminal was very, like clever. You say, like, just, pretty seasoned or something. But, I just think that, like, her face would have been there. It wouldn't be something that, 25 years later, there's just kind of like, oh yeah, like, I sort of remembered, oh, the Swedish Nanny. And it's like, well, she wasn't a nanny. She was there, and,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So.
You mentioned earlier about the victim shaming, victim blaming thing, and again, it seems as if there was somewhat of an attitude that she was out partying, so to speak. Same thing everyone else was doing, but that stigma a little bit still stuck, as it always does with women.
Yeah, it does. And as I was, researching and going through the report, well, she was drunk. Well, she had a fake ID. Well, she put herself in this situation. And I mean, being a young woman, I made mistakes. And, some of my friends made mistakes. And, you come through it the other side. I can remember thinking, how differently the case always kind of fascinated me, but how differently I look at it, as a grown woman, as a mother, than I did back then. Because back then it was just like, that couldn't happen to me. You think you're invincible when you're a kid. And just continually saying, well, she had a fake ID. Well, she shouldn't have been in the club. I guarantee you half the people in that club had a fake ID.
Yeah, that's so ridiculous that the club is there for a reason. It's there for people to go to. It's people go there for dancing, they go meet their friends, they drink, they have fun. I mean, that's what the club is for. So it's crazy to sort of say that, because you went to this club or you went out on a Saturday night and stayed out late and were drinking, that you're somewhat to blame for this thing happening to you.
Right. And especially something so just horrific,
Yeah.
I mean, any crime, but just to say that this young girl who was doing what any one of us was doing, and to just blame it on, and a lot of the reports were, she was drinking, but one of the waitresses came forward and said, like all her friends were like the same blonde, blue-eyed. She may have gotten confused with somebody else. Maybe she wasn't that drunk. Maybe she wasn't, cut off. Maybe she wasn't as intoxicated as they said. And even if she was, that still shouldn't be a defining factor.
Well, you wondered too if the killer, if he was targeting her specifically, if he knew her, if it was random, or if he confused her for someone else. Because as you said, a lot of people just sort of thought these girls all looked the same. They were all sort of the same type of physical look. They were all Swedish, same age, and
And the club did cater to an international crowd. That's what they were known for. But there was it's called the Alley where it was. Now it's commercially built out. There's no clubs in there, but there were I believe like 2 or 3 clubs in the same area, and then you could kind of congregate outside. So it's not as if there weren't many girls who were probably in the same situation. So you do wonder if she was herself targeted.
Yeah, or someone perhaps was at the club and followed her. But then, she would have to go somewhere where she could get snatched. If she was always standing around with her friends, that's not going to happen. So, did she get chatted up by someone? Did she trust someone? Did she know the person? I mean, that's not entirely out of the bounds of reality either. Even if it was just a casual thing, like someone she might have recognized from other club nights or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's an interesting story. It's a tragic story. Again, it's called When Boston Turns Its Back. And the case is still open. If anybody was around at that time period and knows anything, get in touch with, I guess, the Boston PD.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you're working on? Any new projects you'd like to tell us about? Anything exciting going on?
Well, I had another unsolved from my hometown, actually, a woman who went missing. I had on the anniversary of when she went missing, I had an article published, and I'm kind of I'm looking on maybe expanding this story into something, maybe a full-length book, or just otherwise, I'm very interested in the unsolved, but sometimes those stories are kind of hard to to market because it doesn't have this nice little bow on it. So,
and there's the risk that, you know, like if you start writing the book, this is like I said, what I was going through with this, thinking, oh God, is it going to get published? And then half the stories will have been solved, and then it kind of kills the whole concept. And then if you think about writing a long form nonfiction book about it, and then here you are, you've just finished the book and you're sending it to your agent or your publisher, and it's like, it's been solved.
Yeah.
So it's like a hurry up epilogue. high risk endeavors doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, people really are really into unsolved crimes and cold cases.
Yeah.
It just seems to, I mean, going by I mean, this is the 6th book in my series, and it does seem like this is getting more, you know, a lot more readership than some of the other volumes. I guess just the unsolved thing is just people really gravitate to that.
Yeah, and like I said, there's those, like, you know, everyone wants to be like an armchair detective. So, you know, it would be wonderful if someone, you know, came forward and had some information. What I think about is like, I'm blanking right now, the Golden State Killer. Someone wrote the book, and then I think when the book came out, someone was he was found, he was arrested.
That's the late Michelle McNamara's project, right? Yeah, I believe they did finally get the perpetrator after the book was out. But wait, that's a whole story in itself, to die in the middle of writing the book, and then someone else has to come in and that's insane. Well, yeah, I don't know. I'll do true crime, but I don't want to like keel over writing it, you know.
Well, I just think that's,
a bit of distance.
We have this interest in it, and it's, you know, I don't think you can go to any streaming service now and not find, you know, a bunch of true crime programs. So there is definitely just this fascination.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, it's good for us. We have an audience. So.
True. But then sometimes things could get so flooded with stuff that, you know, it's sort of like, okay, you know, we don't need this much of it, but well, whatever. Anyways, I've been speaking with Pamela Costello, who is a contributor in the Best New True Crime Stories,
right here,
Unsolved Crimes and Mysteries. Get this book. It's a great story, among many other great stories, and maybe you might be your own armchair detective and find something that you can solve. You never know. I'm sure the victims' families and friends would enjoy having these cases solved and have some relief in their life. So,
and I just, you know, I wanted her to be remembered, at least. To, you know, especially for the family, you know, this was just a sweet young girl, and you know, I think that's probably really one of the things that really, you know, made this something I wanted to dive into.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, it could have been any of us, you know, doing the same exact thing that she did, and you know, that's always hanging over your head, thinking that, you know, it could have been me as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And till next time, everyone, hopefully I'll be back soon with another episode of the Best New True Crime Stories. Thanks a lot, Pamela.
Bye. Thank you so much.